Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada, building a better future for those who connect our communities.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. Excited to announce a new sponsor of the show, Uber Canada. Thank you for being on board, and thank you for being here with Political Capital. Thank you to everyone else for watching and for subscribing. I am your host, Rob Shaw, as always sequestered here in the CHEK News World Headquarters in Victoria. A lot going on this week. We have the long-awaited decision by the government on Surrey policing, new data on violent repeat offenders in the criminal justice system, private healthcare disputes, double-decker portables in Surrey, and so much more. So thank goodness we have the pod squad here to walk us through it all with their insight. Jeff, Allie, and Jillian here, as always, ready to jump into the BC government's decision on the future of Surrey policing. We've been waiting for it, and it is something around a recommendation that the city continue with a municipal police force, but not blocking them from staying with the RCMP, but they'll offer money if they go this way, but no money on the other way, but it's up to you, Surrey. Not what some people were expecting. It is not a legal order. There are conditions that have to be met if the city wants to go one way or another on HR and that type of thing. Is it a decision? Is it not? What are the ramifications of this going to be? Jeff, why don't we start with you on that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm uber excited to be here with everyone today.
I should have thought of that one. Okay,
there you go.
That's good.
Low-hanging fruit. Look at intrigue in Surrey on the political hot mess that is the transition or not transition on policing. Let's consider where we're at. 2 elections, 2 different mayors, completely opposite positions on a major issue. This isn't beer and parks, right? It's police governance chaos during a public safety crisis. And so what I'm seeing from the Solicitor General today and the recommendation that he's made, which is encouraging Surrey to move forward with the transition to a Surrey Police service, is I think a grown-up decision. I think it's a clear direction from the province that is respectful that in our constitutional legal framework, cities decide about policing decisions, and local wishes are part of that. But I think Farnworth has looked at the Police Act. It says that he has a responsibility to ensure an adequate and effective level of policing and law enforcement throughout British Columbia, and has said, yeah, do what you want to do, Surrey, but over my dead body, if you're going to take police officers from other communities in the province to fill the ranks of the RCMP, which is what will happen at a time when there are 1,500 vacancies with RCMP in British Columbia. So some say he's waffling. I think Farnworth has pancaked efforts to keep the RCMP in Surrey. The direction is clear, and it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out in Surrey.
I guess it comes down to whether you believe that the government had the legal authority to make a decision here. And it sounds like from the government's point of view that they feel like they didn't, that they went up all the way to the end. But I was under the impression, I think a lot of people were, that the Solicitor General's ministry has to sign off and approve or disapprove of a plan, reject or accept, yes or no, binary kind of decision on the name of public safety and, order and safety and policing in a community. So that's a little surprising, Allie, that we didn't quite get that. What do you make of this with the proviso here that you do in your private work with some police unions, but taking that hat off, what do you think of this, and were you surprised it wasn't a bit more definitive?
I think, yes, people were looking for a more definitive response. And to your preamble there, I do think that ultimately the province will have ultimate say in this in the end, but they've essentially given the opportunity to Surrey to make the right decision. And that the opportunity piece is important to highlight here, because I think ultimately what could happen is the city then goes one way, the province is on another side, and then it turns into chaos even more. So had he just come in and said, like, this is what's going to be, this is how we're going to do it, and this is when we're going to do it by, it's going to come across as if the province is bulldozing the whole decision making process. But this opportunity piece is, well, we'll let the city lead them to the right decision, and hopefully they do. And then that way there won't be that like political chaos that'll just turn into a bigger problem, because it very well could just turn into a bigger problem with further delays and then more money wasted, and with people having uncertainty in their job. So I think that, like, in the end, if this really blows up, yeah, the province can come in and fix it, but it's smart. It was a really smart play by the NDP to allow them to make the decision locally, and really enabling our local decision makers to get to that point too.
And the offer being to Surrey will help pay as a province to cover the costs here so that taxpayers aren't hit with a massive transition cost if you go the municipal police route, to try and tilt the decision making a little bit more along that recommendation. Jillian, Surrey is so politically important that to the NDP, to the BC United, to the Greens, to whoever wants to form government, that must have played a factor in here, this weird sort of provincial NDP trying to guess the mood of the electorate after two elections where different mayors got elected with different police plans, and now they're balancing that out at a provincial level when they don't really want to get dragged into it at all. But that must have formed part of this, I would think.
Certainly. I think it's made it much more of a delicate situation compared to, other local governments that have, been rejected for changing in policing, like Esquimalt before, because it is such a highly politicized issue in Surrey. I think at the end of the day, we had a process where Mayor Doug McCallum, who started the transition to Surrey PD, was not super transparent with the process, underestimated the costs, and then we had new Mayor Locke come in, threatening all kinds of crazy tax increases. And I think the province sort of just decided that the best way to fix this, given the fact that this has become a debate about money, is to come to the table with a whole bunch of money for the preferred option. And so that's what they're doing. I do think it is still a risk on the other side to go this route too, because Mayor Locke has really tied her municipal career to this issue. She really campaigned on this issue. She's been extremely firm in her position and her statements. So, I think it's a risk for there to be a confrontation either way. And at the end of the day, I do think that it could have, there was a lot of people in Surrey that were hoping for the province to come down a little bit more clearly. The minister being quite adamant that this basically does amount to him being decisive. I'm not sure why, if the province didn't have the ability to make this decision decisively, why they didn't kind of give us an indication about that before, when this has been an issue we've been talking about for quite some time. But this is where we're at. They're hoping that the money talks and that we can move forward, and that's really what's needed, because Surrey needs to get out of this sort of endless struggle and get on with having a stable solution to its public safety.
Does anyone think, like, there was an all-party committee that studied policing a year or two ago in BC. Everyone got together and a review of the Police Act, and the recommendation being maybe we should get our own provincial police force. And we don't have to go around on this. I just wondered if anyone wants to jump in. Like, is any political party ever going to touch that? Here we have one community's policing issue being so politically difficult to navigate, 2 municipal elections, months of hair splitting at a provincial level, strategies and fallout. Like, are we ever going to get to one provincial police force in BC, or is that just like unimaginable for any political party to tackle, no matter the stripe, given what we're seeing in Surrey? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that. We don't have to go all the way around, but
I'll jump in, because I think it's a really good question, and I'm not sure it's about politicians making the case for it. I think there's a lot of stuff happening in the background with the RCMP, whether it's the challenges they're having federally around the reputation and conduct of officers and controversies around that. There's interesting report on mass shooting in Nova Scotia, which spoke to should RCMP be a contracted local police force in bigger communities. There's some folks in Ottawa who are thinking, is policing really something that the federal government should be doing? Maybe the RCMP should be more like an FBI rather than a provider of day-to-day police services. So I think we're going to reach a point at some point, probably in the not too distant future, where decisions about RCMP and its governance as a federal body are going to force provinces and force local governments to have these kinds of fantastic, clean, not dragged out for a long time, not controversial at all debates about policing in communities. And I think the politics then as now will be about money, and it will be about safety in the community and not about, I think people in Surrey are going to get beyond the Locke versus McCallum and all that, and they're going to ask, what's going to cost me money on my property tax? What's going to make sure I've got boots on the ground in the community, and everywhere else in BC does too, and that's where the decisions will be made.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on that idea? Like, do any parties ever want to push regional policing or provincial policing, or is it just like a ball of monkeys, to mix metaphors that no one wants to open? I don't think that metaphor makes any sense, but that, you know what I mean.
I do want to add. Oh, go ahead, Jillian.
Okay, sorry. You do see the Greens actually have been pushing this already. Adam Olsen's been the MLA on the committee, and I think he's been calling for the full adoption of the committee's recommendations. There's a lot of specific reasons why local policing is better, better hiring and retention, more efficient procurement, better accountability. Olsen raised that in the House this week. And Farnworth said that there's going to be legislation coming in the fall. I doubt it'll be a full shift, but probably we're going to see a bit of a gradual shift of those recommendations be adopted. And yeah, I think for the reasons that Jeff laid out, BC is a particular province politically. I think growing maybe even consensus, or at least agreement from a lot of parties, that it's better to have a little bit more localized control of policing because it's just a better fit for our communities and the unique sort of dynamics that we have here.
Mm-hmm. Allie?
Jeff just said something that I just had to write down because I just needed to be reminded of it, that we are in a public safety crisis. And so just as any other crisis that we've had and endured in this country, then sure enough, changes come from that. And so we potentially could see this as a solution to this crisis, major change and overhaul of the system. You know what, and I hope so. It will be a grind, and it will take forever, and it will take a lot of money, and it'll take a lot of taxpayer dollars. But in the end, will it fix the crisis? That's really ultimately all we want. And then we're seeing something happen across the country too, though, when it comes to recruitment of police officers as well. So Doug Ford has even gone as far as saying that in order to get more police officers out and about in the community, that he would even change the educational requirements and removing the university degree aspect of it, and then you could just go straight into training. And so, I mean, that's completely different. And let's see if it actually one passes and then works. But these are the potential ideas that would get us to a better place for community safety. And I'd just be remiss if I didn't say that, like, in my brain, how a local system potentially would just be more beneficial is ultimately, I just don't want Ottawa in my business. I don't want Ottawa doing anything in BC when they just don't understand what works best for us here. So local is always better.
Yeah. But that policing recruitment part is a huge underpinning of this. The difficulty in convincing people to become police officers, whether they're RCMP or municipal, and the threat that existed here of, if you let Surrey go back to the RCMP, it pulls people from the, Tumbler Ridge detachment and the Port Alice detachment to try to backfill Surrey to meet its contract, and suddenly you get this kind of chaotic spillover effect in small communities that the province didn't want to happen, and the RCMP can't guarantee they got enough officers coming through to make this work. So you're right, Allie, that recruitment problem is huge.
It's the nub of the issue, right? I think that's the nub of the issue, and why the province is, even though they're not being as direct as some might like, are saying stay on with the Surrey piece. Because if you go back to RCMP, then you're beholden to the RCMP to provide those officers, and they're having real struggles recruiting people to those roles. 1,500 vacancies in BC, and local police services in the Solicitor General's mind. And Allie spoke to this about what Ontario's doing is you can have different recruitment approaches, different qualifications, different streams that you can bring people in to fill those roles. So at the end of the day, what it can mean, if it's done well, more police in communities at a time when we need them. Sorry to inflame Twitter, but need them more than ever.
Just moving on to another Surrey issue on what looks like it's going to be the all Surrey show this week. And we talk about it because Surrey is that NDP power base. Any party who wants to win or hold government needs to control those 9 ridings in Surrey, as many as they can. The Surrey School District came out this week, and the board writing a letter to the Education Minister, Rashna Singh, who also has her riding in Surrey, saying, you know what, the government hasn't given us enough money to fund our rising enrollment. The situation's dire. We may have to start stacking portables on top of each other pretty soon, because double-decker portables, because there's not enough land at some schools to accommodate the new portables that are needed. I think the risk here politically is an embarrassment for an NDP government that's promised in a couple elections now to get rid of those portables, and now instead they're going to stack them on top of each other, maybe, or there's a lot of posturing there too. I think, Jillian, how risky a situation is this for the NDP government, and what do we make of what's happening on the school side after 2 elections in which that was a major issue for the parties to contend with?
Yeah, well, I actually think even though Surrey is the latest flashpoint when it comes to school funding, this is really a provincial issue. Lots of island schools facing budget shortfalls, schools up in the Kootenays where I live as well. And a core of this problem is that the money for the portables has to come out of the school's operating budget. Normally, if you need more classroom space, if the schools are building bigger schools or new schools, that comes out of a capital budget. But the portables have to come out of the school's regular operating expenses, which means that they have less money for other things like extracurriculars and counselors and all of this other stuff that students need to kind of get the best education and support. So it's really putting a squeeze on these students and on the teachers. And I think, it was a huge promise to make in 2017. They promised, I think, the full elimination in 4 years. It's gotten worse. And I think, this has sort of been, in a lot of ways, kind of like a sleeping giant of an issue, because schools were already underfunded in 2017. Under the BC Liberals, they were fighting the teachers all the way to the Supreme Court. They lost. NDP came in the minority government and was mandated to increase those funds, but it hasn't kept up with inflation, and it certainly hasn't kept up with the growth that districts have been seeing, especially in communities like Surrey. So I think it is a huge issue because it really starts to affect everybody in the community when there's thousands and thousands of kids that are getting sort of substandard environments for learning. So I think it's surprising that we haven't seen more planning from the government, given that they knew this was an issue when they first came into government. And I think that it could very well end up being a big issue in the next election for sure.
The government arguing that it does have a Surrey Project office for schools there, and they put a lot of effort in, and they were making progress, they say, before COVID, and it's got worse since then in trying to meet those needs. But you're right, there's lots of other districts that are saying basically the same thing. Allie, what does the NDP do in the face of kind of this tough letter and pressure from the Surrey School Board when it has so many political sensitivities there?
Yeah, I think let me start off by saying and just fully supporting teachers throughout this process, right? So I just want to shout out to any teacher who's listening in and watching. They create these beautiful environments no matter what 4 walls are around them. If it's in the actual school building and or a portable, these students have no idea what's happening to them because they end up creating these beautiful spaces. And so that's a big, big challenge to do. And they do it just so wonderfully year after year after year, despite no changes coming their way. And so that's all I kept thinking about as we keep hearing these announcements. But the NDP and any elected representative on this file should just be embarrassed. Like, you can promise everything under the sun, but this is massively important. If I see a ribbon cutting ceremony to all of these record portables, I'm going to lose my mind because this isn't something that we should be celebrating whatsoever. I understand that the NDP are kind of stuck in this, but more emphasis just needs to happen. Here's the thing. Every campaign cycle, we hear the data-driven decisions from everyone. Well, the data was there. Surrey is one of the fastest growing cities in this province. The data is there. The data continues to be there. You need to build, and you need to build quickly because these students are coming. And so if they aren't going to do it this election cycle or this cycle that they're serving, they really need to figure out for the next cycle, because they cannot claim data-driven decisions anymore. And that's the NDP and any elected representative.
The complicating factor being also that the Surrey SkyTrain is going to be built through Fleetwood, and the board pointing out that nowhere in their 5-year capital plan or discussions with the government has the enormous density boom that's going to happen from that is factored into the enrollment projections and the school capital plan as well. Jeff, in government's defense, they have built a lot of schools there, but right now it seems like that district is pretty displeased with where everything stands. And how does the government respond to that, do you think?
Well, and fair play to the district. I'm going to start off my response by agreeing on a couple of things here with things people said. Allie said it's all about the teachers, and I want to give a shout out to the teachers too. And hooray, there are so many of you because you stuck it out and fought Christy Clark and the BC Liberals all the way to the Supreme Court to reverse decisions that unconstitutional decisions made when a certain present leader of the opposition was in cabinet. I think actually, parents and school officials in Surrey are right. Kids shouldn't be schooled in portables. BC NDP promised to get rid of them, and they should be held to their promises.
Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll be back next week. Thanks to the panel for being here as well. We'll be back next week with all the latest here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada, building a better future for those who connect our communities.